Hello, welcome to my channel. The main rule for the quilting is that there are no rules. You will learn, you will watch others, and you will find the methods and ways of quilting that works for you. And that's the most important thing, because you need to find what works for you to be able to enjoy the process. What you will see is my process of working with different materials and different designs, and I hope some of those tips and tricks will help you in your own journey. Hi everyone, this is Paula from Paula Quilting. Today I will show you how I'm going to go about to quilt this quilt on my Juki 8100. Before I start quilting, just a little bit of background for this quilt. So I had a die for a very complicated block. I've cut the fabric, I start putting it together, piecing the pieces, and it didn't work for me. It was too mundane, too complicated. The pieces didn't fit the way I would like them to fit. So I've decided to cut the losses, and I've used some of the pieces into this quilt. I've added some crumb blocks. I've added some normal squares blocks, and that's how this quilt came alive. It's not very big quilt. It will be one of the charity quilts for the Linus project. But when you see it later, all quilted, I hope you will like it. Totally scrappy. So in this tutorial I will show you two things. So one, I will show you how I quilt it. Though this machine only stitch straight, I will be doing the wavy stitching on it. So I've pinned this quilt in the rows quite regularly, and what I would like to do is I will be going in between the pins in like a slalom. Every two pins I will change direction and go around it. That will save me on taking out the pins every time I kind of get to it, and also the fabric will not shift so much. That's one thing. And the second thing I will show you in this video is how I will do a wonky binding. So the wonky binding I would use on two occasions. One, to add the interest to the quilt, and the two, sometimes you quilt your quilt, you square it up all around, you put it together, you fold it together, and the edges do not come, you know, evenly on all sides. If it's not even a little bit, that's fine. This, you know, you make your quilt by hand or by machine. It's all manual work, so a little bit of unevenness is fine. But if it's a lot of difference on those edges, then I would use this technique. Okay, so you can see that in that first row I was trying to go every two pins, but that curve here was too big. It wasn't easy to maneuver quickly on that machine, and obviously the whole purpose is to use this machine is just to do it quickly. So I've changed it from here, and I will go every three pins, and that's fine. If you do the design and the design doesn't work after first pass, just adjust it. You know, you should enjoy what you're doing and not stress about it, so just amend it and go along with what you want. I will also increase the stitch length a little bit. That will also make the quilting quicker. So I think I'll just go to 4, a little bit over the 4, and we'll see how it looks. If it looks fine, I will leave it. If it looks not so great, I will amend it again with the next pass. Okay, just to show you, I'm not trying to follow exactly the same line as the first one. I just more or less going with the same curves, but if you go in different angle, that's fine as well. We're not trying to create any specific pattern. It just is zigzag free, you know, it's kind of like a free motion quilting really. Wherever needle takes you, just go with it. Now I finished quilting in one direction, and I will just go and do the same thing other way around. So it's just going to make that kind of square-ish pattern, but obviously it's with the wavy lines. So now if I'm going the other way and I'm crossing the lines previously made, I will be going a little bit slower, because I just need to make sure there's no puckering here. Now with the scrappy quilts, or with blocks like this where it's a crumb quilting, where the stitches are, the seams between the smaller pieces are thicker in some places, that puckering may occur, so just go slower on those ones to kind of control what you do. And if you might need to be able to stretch that fabric a little bit here, or pull it a little bit, depends on the situation. Just go slower if you're going the other way around. Again, I'm not trying to make any special pattern here. This time around I'm going just between the pins in the smaller curves, just to make it a little bit different on the other side. Okay, so I will finish quilting and I will show you on the end how the whole piece looks like. Okay, so I finished quilting the quilt. Let's have a look if you can see the lines I've used. You can see that the lines are not straight. I went both ways. So there's a line here, there's a line here, there are some loops here, they're crossing each other. But it's not very dense. Normally I would square a quilt first to prepare it for the binding, but because we're going to be putting a wavy binding, we can just cut straight away. Now normally I would do it by hand straight away, the cutting part, but if you're not feeling comfortable doing it that way, you may like to draw some lines first. So you can use for that some heat erasable pens or any other marking. So I've got a pen, I can use that, it will be showing, yeah. Or to be fair, on this even chalk will work fine, but since I've got the pen, I will use pen to draw it. So on the outside the curve can be quite big, but obviously I don't want to lose the width or the length of the quilt, so I'm not going to be doing very deep ones. But the one inside, so here I can go quite nice and deep, but this one's here, the inside one, make them as shallow as possible because it will be easier to put the binding later. So something like this. Again, it doesn't have to be even, it's drawn by hand. In the corner just make it nice and then rounded here. Again, you will go in the shallow inside, and then the outside can be a little bit more rounded here. So go around the whole of the quilt, have a look how it looks before you start cutting. You can rearrange the lines if you don't like it. I will do the cutting bit and I will come back to show you how it looks. Okay, I finished cutting the quilt all around. In some places the cutting reflects the line that were there with from the quilting, which is looking good too. Now let's talk about the binding you can use for it, or you should use for it. So normally I do use my 2.5 strips binding. They are straight cut, they go around the edges quite nicely. You know, you sew on one side, then you twist and you sew on the other side, either by hand or you go all the way around if you want to use the machine to quilt it. They can be scrappy, so 2 or more different fabrics. If I'm using my shared fabric strips, the strips will be even shorter sometimes, so that looks very nice on this scrappy quilt. Now for this project, because of the curves, you will need to do 2 things. You either use a piece of fabric and cut it in diagonal, so you have a bias there, so it stretches. This one doesn't stretch, it's cut straight. Or you can use ready-made bias tape, and if you have a look at my eBay shop, I've got some for sale. So this one is quite stretchy, so when you're sewing it, and I will show you in a minute, you sew it as you would normally on this side or on the other side, depends how you want to finish the binding, by hand or by machine, and then it makes it very easy to make that curve here or the other side. You cannot do that with the straight cut strips for the binding, so just be mindful of that. Like I said, I've got basic colors in my eBay shop. I normally hold like 3 or 4 colors because they just will be always that color will be always in one of the quilts, so I've got them on sale. So if you don't have at home, just have a look in my eBay shop, and if you find that the amount I've got on eBay is either not enough or too much, just give me a shout or leave a comment, and I can make a eBay auction just for you. Now I will be showing you one of the videos what to do with the leftovers of those, because you know you will never measure to exact point how much you need. You're always buying a little bit more, and if you have pieces which are maybe 20 inches, 30 inches, a little bit more, you can still use them as a binding. And because I want to finish that binding by machine, I am going to be sewing to the left side of the quilt. You don't start from the very edge, you start from maybe 4 inches away, just so you have enough space to link it together when it goes to the other side. And I will start about here, go around, link the binding together, go to the right hand side, and I will show you how I do it. Okay, so I'm sewing on the left hand side because I'll be finishing off the binding by machine on the right hand side. So you want to go in, when you open that binding, you can see there are already lines ironed on, so you go in the line, the edge of the tape should go with the edge of your quilt, and you're going to sew on the line. So when you turn it around, that line nicely make the edge of this quilt, of this binding on this side. So let's go ahead. And because it will have curves both ways, so just go slowly, just make sure that this edge on the right hand side nicely go with your quilt. Especially on those bigger curves here, you can see I'm pulling the tape. I stretch it a little bit if I have to, or I'm pushing it to make a nice curve. So as far as there is no pleat, you'll be fine. You can stretch it or you can push it together a little bit more. So I've sewn the binding all around, so now we've got to the point where we're gonna have to link the edges together. So for now I will just cut more or less what I need to link it. I'm not measuring anything for this point of time, and I stop this one here. So if it was straight binding, it would have been fairly easy and quick to kind of measure how much of this I need to have and where to link it. Because it's wavy, there's a little bit more steps to it. So what I will do first is I will clip the edge, or you can pin it, depends what you've got available, just to measure a bit better how much of the binding I need to have left on the end. Now it's not the very specific measurement, because remember this will stretch a little bit, so actually if we make a mistake and we cut it slightly too short, we can work with it as well. So for now I'm just we'll just clip it to more or less measure how much I need to cut. So that's where I am at the moment. So that's the last curve here, and then I will do the similar thing from the other side. Okay, so the space between the edge of my foot and the needle is about 1/4 inch. So what I need is to cut one of those strips 1/2 inch longer than the edge of the other one, so half an inch will be more or less, that's a quarter, about here. Again, I'm not measuring it exactly, you can do if you like to, but I'm not measuring because this have a little bit of give, so I'm not so worried about it. So more or less I want to cut it in this space, so I will just fold it where I think that half an inch is, and I will just cut it. Here you go. So that's step 1. Step 2 will be to link those two things together, those two edges. So what I normally do, I just fold it, because I left quite a long edge there, there's no problem with it. I will use one of those clips to kind of hold it for me into place. Because I'm using cream thread, what I need to make sure is I'm going to decrease the length of the stitch. That means that the cream thread is not going to be visible when I kind of open it after stitching, so I'll just show you in a minute what to do. Now I'm clipping it there just so they don't move too much, but you can use a pin if you want to. Sometimes I don't even do that. And I will make my stitch length 1/3, 1, whatever you have on your machine, just make it much smaller. So now I will stitch it this way, then I will go backward, just to go backwards to the edge. I'm doing that so I don't have the thread sticking out straight from the edge, and also sometimes it like to go into the feeding dogs of the machine, so that's why I go I start not from the very edge and then I go backwards if need to. See, that's what happened now. Okay, I'll just adjust it. Again, went to the end, stitch backwards and cut the thread. Okay, let's remove the clips. Now what I will do is just finger press that open, and we're ready to carry on with the stitching. So this is where I stopped. Now don't forget to change your length stitch back to what it was. Normally it's about 2.5, and that's fine. I sometimes even increase it to 3 on the inside of the binding, because it's not going to be visible from outside anyway. Okay, that last curve now here. Just to check if I stitched it enough. To be fair, I wouldn't worry if I stitch too small, because I can stretch it. I don't want to have it too much, because then there's going to be a pleat there. So if you did stitch it not enough, just go back and stitch a little bit more. Or the other thing you can do, just go to the side and you would kind of create that pleat on one side. Just be mindful of that one. But it looks like I cut it fine, and then I'll just finish off on this side. Here you go. So this is what it looks like. Just cut the thread on this side. So it may not look great as it is at the moment, but because you will fold it once and that will be your edge, you can see, because the stitch was so small on that linkage here, the thread is not visible, so whatever thread color you've used is fine. Now let me turn it around and I will start stitching on the right hand side. Here you go. I do not necessarily start where I finished. I just start in any point of the quilt. It's fine. It might be a bit easier to start on the outside curve. Now I do not want a straight stitching here. I would like to put something more decorative. Normally, you know, everyone got their own favorite stitches, so just use what you like. You can go with the straight stitch as well, just whatever you fancy. Okay, so the first one is going to be very slow. But at this point of time I also kind of see how that stitch I've picked looks like, and it looks like it's fine, so I'll just carry on with that. And you see, it's quite adaptive. You can stretch it to make sure it looks fine and it goes where you want it. And just go to that first inside curve. No problem whatsoever. That's where the binding has been linked here together. What I can do is actually use one of those clips to help me to hold it into place, because it's a little bit bulkier here, kind of sticking out. But we can get there as well. Just going to help to keep it in place. So here we go. And when you get into that bulk, just go slower. If you go too quick, machine may like sometimes skip the stitches there, so just go slowly. Yeah, across that one already. So again, I'm just pulling a little bit that binding from behind to make sure I don't have too much pleat on the back. Go over. Okay, this is how it looks so far. I will carry on all around and I'll show you when the quilt is finished. So I'd like to quickly show you one thing here. In all of those bigger curves, especially at the corner here, sometimes when you're going ahead, you may find that some fabric is sticking out when you're closing it, something like that. If that's happened, just go ahead and trim it. Just trim a little bit and then it will nicely close it for you. So I finished sewing all around the quilt. This is how it looks at the front. This is how it looks at the back. I've added my label. Now I'll just go and check all around the quilt at the front and the back and bury all the loose threads. And I put it into the washing and the quilt is ready. So here it is, finished quilt with wavy binding. That red color really nicely framed it all around. So if you have a problem with your borders, perhaps they do not square up, or your overall quilt doesn't square up, or you just want to add nice detail to your quilt, go ahead and try freehand wavy, cut and bind it with the bias tape all around it. For this quilt I use 3 types of blocks. The one in the middle is the pieces I've cut for that very complicated block which didn't work for me, so I just made it into something else. Then it's on the sides we have just simple squares, and on the edges we have a crumb blocks. My crumb blocks usually are color coordinated. It just make it a little bit better for me. However, in some further videos I will show a strategy on how to tone down a crazy quilt blocks as well. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to my channel to support my work. For further inspiration and examples of my work, you can check my Instagram or Facebook page. For resources mentioned in my videos, have a look in my eBay shop. Happy creating!